Okay, everyone, welcome to our first event of 2025, SVG Europe Audio's Scaling Up for DTC. Today, we're going to be talking about how, whether it's the adoption of automated mixing, the use of smart plugins to clean up inputs, or finding new efficiencies through AI, broadcasters are adapting technology in new ways to not only upscale content, but to drive more fan engagement. We have a panel of industry-leading experts for you today with Anthony Sachot, Warner Brothers Discovery Sports Europe Senior Director of Audio Technology, Pete Mercer, Warner Brothers Discovery Director of Live Production, Carl Malone, NBC Sports and Olympics Senior Director of Audio Engineering, Michael Lindemeyer, NEP Germany Head of Audio, and Rob Oldfield, Sound to Sound Co-founder and CEO. Right, so before we begin, please remember we've got the chat button down the bottom. So if you've got any questions for any of our speakers or any comments you'd like to make, just post them as we go along. And my expert chair and mate from across the pond, Mr. Roger Charlesworth, and the speakers will pick those up as we go. And that's it. Over to you, Roger.
Oh, great. Thanks, Heather. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. This is a really interesting subject. I think we're seeing this giant change in how television works as we're making a transition to direct-to-consumer streaming from traditional MVPDs and broadcast. And this has a lot of effects on television in general, but especially on sports. It's really changed how sports can be consumed and how audiences can be aggregated. And a lot of that has to do with scale. I guess, Carl, I just start with you. Carl, can you just talk about that issue in terms of how your work at NBC Sports and Olympics is changing because of the sort of the transition to streaming the content?
Sure, and thanks for the invite, Heather and Roger and SVG. So for Peacock is the name of the NBC Comcast DTC platform, and it was launched back in 2020, just on the end of COVID. Obviously, a lot of NBC shows, live sports, exclusive originals, things like that. And something that was actually mentioned this morning on social media, like 800,000 hours of on-demand content, which we can't forget. Like, it's a really strong part of direct-to-consumer is the VOD aspect. So much stuff to rewatch. And then we're up to, I think, 36 million subscribers as of January this year. We introduced 5.1, I think it was, back in 2023, and then Dolby Atmos to Peacock in 24, I think it was, and July 24. And really, the fact is, it's just going strength to strength with the amount of sports that we have to, like college basketball and Premier League football. The direct-to-consumer model was a sort of a must-have for us to be able to get so much of that content on air, so to speak. And now we're doing 100 games of college basketball, and we've had to sort of increase. People are doing it different ways, whether you build small control rooms, which we have, or you go to the cloud. In order to get this content out, you need to get the content out and maintain the quality, and that's what we've been doing. We've been building like 4 new studios in NBC Sports in Stamford, just to deal with college basketball as one, which is it's a huge event for US viewers. Yeah, and then on the back of Olympics, like, we streamed everything over Peacock for Olympics. So it's a great model for us because we control the path, really, not having to go through, cable head ends, and it just gives us a lot more flexibility as well to try new things.
Yeah. But it's also been, I guess, a question of really scaling up, as you say, building more and more control rooms. And I want to kind of come back to that a little bit, but and that's all been sort of premium content, but also streaming has enabled the ability to cover sort of more niche sports. And Michael, you were talking a little bit about the stuff with Dyn Media, where you're covering handball and volleyball and table tennis, things like that. And that's been a sort of a challenge to sort of, I don't know, start with a clean slate and figure out how to do that as efficiently as possible. And I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit, because I think that's a big thing of like, how do we scale and how do we scale efficiently? And in the case of Dyn Media, some of that is super efficient, but it allows you to cover something like handball.
Correct. So thank you very much that you invite me. When NEP Germany got the contract in 23 that we cover the first handball league and the first basketball league, we have to find a concept that we can cover 700 games per season. And so we start to figure out some ideas and some concepts that we can bring with a remote setup very fast, the equipment to the arenas and bring all the signals to a hub point, and then we create the feed for, I will say, different platforms, because we do the basic feed in handball and basketball. And after we hand over it to the contribution partner, he will send it to Dyn, and he makes his full content on his own platform. But it goes to third and second part users, and it goes to the betting. And so, we have designed a scalable setup, which is with we call it remote section, that we have 6 remote units which can drive to the arena, and we have 6 galleries, 2 in Munich in the headquarter and 4 in Cologne by the customer, where the program is then fixed. The concept we find out is scalable, so that we can go with other sports very fast and easy. So it was nice for this 1,000 games we do now, that we can create a new concept to get content to life.
And has audio been a big focus of that then?
Yeah, the audio was at the beginning a little headache for us, because we have to find ways to make the monitor mix on site. Then we figure out that for the delay, we need the ambience mix on site, but the full mix for the transmission, for the content, we do at the headquarter. So for us, it was very necessary to find a product and a platform where we have different DSP capacities on the venue side and in the hub side. And so we find a product that is from direct out, the MP, where we can control in the whole network to mix the monitor mix on site for the talents, to do the ambience mix on site, so we can make a very fast handover without delay, and all this and the submix from the ambience and additional signals like commentator, talent microphones we send to Munich to the hub and make there the rest, so the fix mix for the transmission.
And you kind of have a sort of a scene-based approach, right, with the audio?
Yeah.
Explain how that works.
Yeah, we have do a setup where we can control all, I will say, the monitor mix and the transmission mix with snapshot scenes, so that we don't need an audio engineer to mix it. Automation will be mix it, and we look what happened in a transmission and call it scenes, like the scene the commentator is talking to the ambience. The commentator makes a flash interview, or a guest is interviewed from a talent on site. And so we create scenes, and these scenes can be triggered from the director, from the producer, or if the commentator wants, he can trigger the scenes additional. And so we can go more with our persons who do the mix before in the quality control, and that help us to make this massive content in a range of quality. So we have not so many not so big range in the quality from each game with the scenes.
Interesting.
Because all is pre-configured, and the automation will be I would say, crossover to move from each scene to the next scene, and that can be triggered from the producer. Often he do that.
Interesting. Anthony, just want to turn to you. Scale is not a new thing for you guys. You've sort of dealt with a huge scale in terms of languages and stuff like that, supporting multiple languages, and especially for large events like the Olympics. Talk about how you use automation to kind of to address the need to make so many different versions.
Thanks for inviting me to the panel first. We've been used to broadcast on our historic Eurosport channels, linear historic Eurosport channels, 20 languages on each Eurosport 1 and Eurosport 2. So we're used to let's say to that volume. The thing is, previously when we had this only 2 channels, we had the number of mixers and operators doing each of the language, and then when we started, remember the first push was 2018, 2019, essentially with cycling, where we had to push all these races in a lot of languages, and on Eurosport Player first, and now we are on Max, of course. But essentially the main change was really the volume. And when you start talking about volume, if you have to handle a lot of events, a lot of concurrent events in a lot of different languages, you can't have that kind of that number of manual mixers with one operator in front each of them. So as Michael said, we had to move to this automation system where then the role of the audio operators is essentially doing the routings, doing the lineups with the commentators, and then doing the routings. On our side in audio, on the commentary audio at Eurosport, we have different, all the productions are sorted in different levels, bronze, silver, and gold levels. On our side, we add commentary on any, we need to be able to add commentary on any of them independently if that's of the level of production. Then it depends if it goes to linear, to digital, or to both of them. But so we are currently using an Automix software platform, and the operators can manage up to 10 or 15 concurrent events in each of their language. The thing we pay attention to is that for the Serbian programs, for example, there is a Serbian operator who is doing the routing, the lineup with the commentator, and listening to the programs. It doesn't listen to the 15 programs at the same time, but he can switch from one to the other. So we need to have this big Automix platform. In terms of flexibility, we pay per the hour. We have a pool of licenses which are permanent because we have a general level of productions. And during the Olympics, for example, we went up to, I think the biggest usage was 300 mixers used at the same time for the commentary. So in that case, we have like we pay on demand the mixers that we use.
Wow, it's huge.
It's quite big, and in terms of commentary, same. We have something like 120 physical voiceover booths in Europe, but we are not able to have these 300 booths for 2 weeks every 4 years. So we have. And we use it all the time, of course, but we have our remote commentary platform, which allows the commentators to be anywhere they have public internet to be able to contribute any commentary to our programs.
Yeah, wow. What about, as we kind of scale up, I think a question has come up a little bit about how do you QC all that? And Rob, that's something that you've been working on a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's something that's kind of really front and center for us at the moment. So this is coming out in April out of Salsa Sound. We're using AI to automate the QC processes for audio. I mean, we've seen firsthand countless times going into like any sort of MCR facility, and you can see thousands of video monitors, but very little going on in terms of audio QC. And we noticed that a lot of the automated processes are actually really quite basic, maybe limited to kind of mute detection and loudness or some kind of bit stream elements. And we wanted to go further than that and actually be able to kind of use algorithmic listening to make decisions as to whether the quality was acceptable or not. And so some of the kind of the main things that we've been looking at, and this is going to be an ongoing thing, I think, for us, has been kind of speech intelligibility. So how well the speech is mixed compared to the background and other elements, and making sure that that intelligibility is good enough for normal hearing people, but also that you can kind of generate mixes that would also be suitable for hearing impaired viewers or aging viewers. So that's a huge piece. And coming up, I think it's in June this year, there's some new European accessibility regulations, which I think are going to make that even more important for broadcasters, particularly as we generate more and more content in a direct-to-consumer sort of workflow like we're discussing on this call, where we just got to do things at scale, and managing things like speech intelligibility, which is quite it's kind of a subjective measure, isn't it? It's got an objective element to it, which is why we can measure it.
But is there more than loudness to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's it's complicated, but the way that we do it is we've trained a neural network to understand how different masking elements from the background noise will kind of overlap keywords within the dialogue. And so you have to be able to understand a certain number of words in a sentence to be able to kind of get a sense of what's going on, and recognizing that those words are selectively masked by different loudness, different noise profiles in the background. And so being able to ascertain when the background is masking those key elements of speech is what kind of gives you a clue as to what the speech intelligibility is like. So and this is proven in the academic literature. So that's the way that we've applied this, and we're really happy with that kind of speech intelligibility metric. But the other element of it is you may be able to hear the speech really clearly, and it may not be masked by the background, but actually the speech may be quite poorly recorded. So if somebody's speaking off axis to a microphone or too close to the capsule and it's a bit mumbly, then that affects, you might have a really clean speech sound, but actually it's just bad diction or badly recorded. And that's not a matter of speech intelligibility per se, that's a speech quality problem. And so we've got an engine that's listening out for key things that enable you to kind of understand the actual quality of the raw speech in and of itself. So it kind of detects mumbling or, like I say, bad diction or kind of EQ imbalance or over compression and things like that. So these are, I think, really key. Like as we go to scale, it's not possible. Like Anthony was saying, you can't have loads of people mixing these things. So automation's needed at the production stage, but also as you prepare to distribute this over whatever platform, there's not enough people to listen to it. There's not enough time to listen to it. So algorithmic listening is, I think, becoming more and more of a pressing issue for our industry. And there's other kind of nuances, like things like detecting overmodulation, distortion, or bad mixing technique, or EQ that doesn't match. So like the Olympics is a good example where you've got multiple sports and people are able to flick between those different channels on Peacock, for example. Then you don't want them to sound completely different to one another. Obviously, they sound different because they're different sports are in different arena, but the overall flavor should have a relative consistency. Or if you're watching that Premier League and you've got kind of that Amazon Prime when they've got every single match and you're flicking between them, it's not acceptable to have the loudness varying wildly or the EQ varying wildly between games. So I think these kind of automated QC tools are very much needed at the moment.
Well, what about moving to and I'll drag you in, Pete or Carl or anybody, moving sort of to the sharp end of this, do we see autonomous mixing or autonomous effects mixing playing a bigger role in scaling? And Rob talks about commentary quality. Do we need better AI-based tools for cleaning up commentary? Pete, take a shot at this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that sharp end. I like all these. When Loudness came out, it was quite controversial at the time. But like all these things are a tool, right? And I think and they can be utilized. And I think more and more people I see are trying these new tools. We're also looking at finding the right application to make a consistent product. So whether you're doing netball, darts, or doing football, you are trying to make a consistent product. The show is normally hard enough to do with all the elements. It can be quite a volatile environment, an OB environment. So it's just providing enough tools to allow the team and the operators to make a good and consistent product. And I think for me, that's the drive. I mean, it's not really about trying to just find whether it's buzzwords or the new thing, but whether it actually has real useful applications. And I think that's AI definitely can do that. But we've seen it, and some of the South of Sound stuff is great. It's just finding enough ways that we can implement it also cheaply and across the entire portfolio, and also in the entire OB range and trucks and equipment that we use for all the different vendors. Because Warner Brothers, we have to partner with OB providers for a lot of our external use, and some of our premium content. So it's having enough solutions that we can do that across the entire portfolio, which is broad and wide. And it's at different values as well. So World Superbikes has a very different budget to Premier League. So it's just having enough cheap options that is easy, again, scale, and also to all the right solutions, which I think we're not quite there yet. And I don't think we've got quite the whole portfolio of products yet in that sense.
The production environment, you talked about trucks. Carl, you were speaking earlier about scaling up, and you're really largely on what I would call a production hub model, that even for relatively high-end content, and there are exceptions, but a lot of it is coming out of galleries in Stamford. And I guess I'm curious what the levers are there, that the consistency of the product, the staffing issues, what is it that works about that model?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a good example of that is golf. We've taken a lot of golf back to Stamford. 18 holes of golf with tee and green mics and surround. We do surround at each green and things like that. So it's one of those things when people looked at this and said, "There's no way you can bring golf home." But when you start looking at how much it costs to get, you look at any golf compound and the amount of trucks that are in there, it's just it's literally a circus. So there was a lot of potential money savings when we had the conversation about how to bring golf home, and we have the technology to do it, between fast IP codecs and be it embedded audio or MADI over media links. All that technology was there. We had to build submix rooms, because any certainly in the US, we have a whole truck for submix, or certainly a console for submixing all the tees and greens. Whereas the main mix looks after the talent and the replays, because golf, if anybody doesn't know, it's not all live. It's made up of tape playback live, because everything's happening all at the same time. So it's quite a circus. So yeah, bringing that back was really a huge lift, but very soon it started to settle down, and it can't look or sound any different than a standard PGA at the weekend, where where we're on site with big trucks and a full compound. Talents still have to hear the same things in their ear, have to be able to pick up without latency. So it takes a little bit, and I think we've all learned over the last 4 or 5 years, you know, what works and what doesn't work in remote production. So for us, it's sort of the pinnacle of remote production. If you can do golf as a remote production event, you know, that's huge. And, you know, having being able to do 2, you know, sometimes 3 golf events in a week, and be in the same chair and not have to move, just go back to the hotel a mile away. You know, that's been a huge thing. And that's always been one of the things that you know, everybody's always enjoyed the fact about remote production was that, you know, people didn't have to travel all over the country, and, you know, trucks didn't have to travel so much. And, you know, you don't have all the weather and difficulties that you might have, you know, for a normal event getting around the country.
And I guess that's not an inconsiderable you know, it's quite a consideration, right? Financially, it's a commitment, right? It's in integration, it's connectivity. You know, you have to have all those right elements to make that commitment and make it cost effective. And I guess you must do. I don't know what your rights are for the golf club, but that must have been part of the choice, right? And the consideration. Yeah, it's the travel and expenses that save you the money. I mean, when you look at there's so many players now, with you know, dedicated, you know, low latency IP transport options. You know, there's a new one every year. So it's becoming much cheaper to be able to send, you know, high bandwidth audio and video over IP on, you know, dedicated networks. So it's actually really the travel and expenses that's the savior, where you're, you know, many people work in a golf event, and where are they going? Hawaii, Miami. I mean, you still have to have a hub truck where you still need A2s, and you need the reporters, because the A2s still have to travel around and you know, put the mics out and travel around with the, you know, in the middle of on the fairways. Basically, you need a shotgun mic to pick up the ball landing. So I mean, that goes back to the quality. The quality can suffer from doing any of this. Yeah, I was looking at the transmission costs, and actually the transmission costs are, because you're sending so many more feeds back than you would normally from a truck, they have increased, but it's really the travel and expenses that save you the most. You know, hotels and meals and stuff.
And what's the impact? I mean, is there a positive impact on quality? Is there a more consistent operation?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when you're, you know, listen, when you're doing golf in a truck, there's a tendency for the same A1 to be in the same truck generally. So I mean, we can't really say that you know, you're in a different truck every week. With golf, you're generally in the same truck with the same setup. It's familiar to you. But I just think, you know, it's just we've always said that there's so many more, when you have issues, there's a lot more engineers to help you out in Stamford, Connecticut, at NBC, and you know, they're just nicer rooms acoustically, and you don't have the fan noise, and you know, you just have a lot more options to be able to create, you know, an artistic product as opposed to just getting it out on air.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting where the scalability comes. And I mean, what you kind of operate, I mean, Warner Brothers Discovery, you sort of operate production hub. You have virtualized resources like the Llama server farms or whatever, that those are virtualized, right, Anthony? What about the cloud, and what's the mixture of all this? Will we be doing more as we try to scale? Do we do more production in the cloud? And does that play a role, or do you see that stuff being on-prem? Either of you guys?
I'll start if you like. I think it's, for me, and I try to be production facing really, and take production requirements. If the production requires it and the budget requires it, then and also you've got all the right elements, yeah, this is suitable for cloud. I think eventually, long term, it will, you know, the solutions will look quite the same. You know, there'll be COT servers in bays, you know, and it's just software running, right? So I think we all understand that. I think, but right now, that's not what those trucks are like, you know. So I think we'll look at doing more cloud, but we're looking at, you know, the rights, you know, looking at particular rights. So we're doing that right now, looking at, you know, what's suitable in our portfolio, because you know, it's a bit of a journey. We have done it, we do it, but not large scale in terms of cloud production. So it's just looking at that as strategically and looking where we can make those, those moves and how we can grow it. But it's we can't risk our current portfolios. It's just trying to do it in the right way.
Yeah, and you really need to check if that when that makes sense or not to move to cloud. If you have a daily show that you need to produce, do you really need to move to cloud? The cost will not be efficient if you go to cloud for a daily show. But if you need for 2 weeks every 4 years to move from, let's say, a 20 classic PCRs to a 40 or 50 PCRs because you have a lot more channels to fill, then it really starts to make a complete sense. So you need to have a model which can be cloud-based, and then you can deploy at the scale that you need. The thing is, and on our side, on the audio, we are driven by the production and essentially the video, where the source always comes with its international sound. If the source and the international sound is produced and in the cloud, then the audio mix will be in the cloud because you need to stick to the video, sorry, to remain in sync. If your video is processed on-prem, then remain on-prem. That's really the key point on this. So it really depends on the use cases that you have. If on a daily show, that's probably not worth going to cloud, but on exceptional basis, that's really powerful, because having a PCR which would be used 15 days every 4 years is probably a waste of space, money, and etc. So in that case, that's a very good opportunity, I think.
I think also you eventually run out of production space if we keep getting more content. I mean, it's only so many control rooms, and somebody makes a decision. It's like, how can we do this? We got this new contract. How are we going to do this? Somebody's going to say, oh, let's do it in the cloud, and off we go.
And that's where the cloud really wins, right? It's when you're just paying for more grunts, right, and more GPU, So that's, but you have to incorporate that into your model and into your solutions. That is where you get your scale from, and it's probably the most cost-effective way to do it, I would have thought.
What do you think, Rob?
Definitely. It's just about using the right tool for the right job in the right circumstance, isn't it, really? I mean, I don't think that cloud is any different particularly. It's just a longer cable in most cases, whether or not you're using a server farm that's in your own facility, whether you're using edge compute or whether you're using AWS, you're still doing software-based workflows. So I think having tools and license models that are flexible across all of that, then yeah, it just allows content providers to pick and choose the flavor for the particular event or geography of that event.
And I think user interface is going to have a massive impact, I think, because everyone's up against budgets and timelines, and at the minute, it's quite tangible, an OB truck, and you can patch things quite easily. It can be quite changeable, and I think and I know it is getting there, but it's not quite delivered, not in the industry as standard. But once that starts to be delivered in a cloud format with that real amount of flexibility, I think that'll be the real game changer for me. When you can turn up quickly and get something going really quick, and you've got capacity and scale, then I think that's really where you get the difference.
Well, and it's a question of what do you need on the ground. I mean, Michael, for the stuff that for the Dynemedia stuff, the contribution side is pretty streamlined. What do you use in those setups? Is that a flight cases or a small van or?
Yeah, we use to the venues small flight cases, and I will add the discussion. If you got an international feed, it's easy to go in the cloud and to scale it in the cloud. And for our production, where we have decentralized actions, for example, the commentator can sit in the venue or the Munich, or the commentator can sit by our customer in Cologne. And then you have the interaction between the commentator sitting in Cologne, guest is standing in the arena. When you have too long delays between the cloud, so it doesn't work in my brain, because we have think about that, how we can go in the cloud. or we do it, I call it on-prem. And now we do it on-prem with hardware in two parts. So we go with a flight case to the venue where we do the monitor mix and we do the transmission mix, I explain, in the hub, but we have the interactive between where is the commentator sitting. And so we find this solution good, that we have different DSP sections in the hardware where we control centralized. So in our network, there can be 6 venue kits and 6 arenas in the same time. And we control all the audio DSPs in our network with our controlled system where we program it. And it helps us to bring all this content with a good quality to the customers. When you do this, for example, with 6 OB bands, we have 6 different mixes. And here we can come with less people to a better quality because we do it in the centralized section. And what us help maybe for the discussion for so many commentators on the cloud is there's a big difference if the commentator is sitting in the arena and you have massive spill, which is coming inside his speech to his microphone, or he is sitting in the booth. So for us, it's very nice he's sitting in the booth in Cologne or in Munich, because then we have it clear. And we lose a little bit AI plugins and someone else, and then it works very good. And if he's sitting in the arena and we got much spill from the crowd, then we have to think about how we can rise up the quality.
That's an interesting point. And this is something, Carl, that you've done. Your sort of booth, whatever you call it, tube world, off tube world gets bigger and bigger for Olympics. What's the mix of commentators that are centralized versus on site?
Well, I guess there's we have a primetime show on NBC, so 3 hours a day, 17 days during Olympics. So for those primetime shows, we always have commentators on site. So you think about figure skating for Turin, Milan, figure skating and sliding, bobsled and alpine skiing and things like that. Announcers on site, booth on site, and all that'll be turned around for our primetime show. But we'll also be going live out on our Peacock, and we'll have, I don't know, this time we'll probably have about 12 booths for off-tube booths in Stamford, Connecticut. And for Paris, I think we had about between 28 and 32 with the audio description booths as well. And that's, I love commentators in a booth, because it allows us to do this mix on site in Paris or Milan, which is very wide and very immersive, and of course there are tools for center channel to help out the center channel, so we kind of do both. It's sort of, we have commentators on site, but also in booths.
Well, and for some sports and some networks, the sort of remote commentators, as Michael was saying, have become more important just for economic reasons. So ESPN doesn't send as much talent to the venues as they used to. And they found out during the COVID they didn't have to, so then some sports they cut back.
It's also part of overheads. It costs money to send everybody overseas, whether they're technicians or talent. So
during the Olympics for Eurosport, we had something like approximately 30 on-site booths, where we used 150 off-tube booths, physical off-tube booths, in our different in our 20 offices across Europe, plus an additional 250 positions remote commentary platform where the guys were commentating from home or from anywhere else. But the percentage of on-site commentary, at least on us, is quite slow. It's quite low, sorry. On cycling, for example, I think we broadcast 300 races per year. That's 1,000 broadcasts. The percentage of on-site commentators on these races, except on the 3 major Grand Tours, is really, really low. Usually they do it from off tube.
And so, that's a combination of off tube in various countries. The off tubes are in various countries.
Yep,
Right.
20 different countries.
So they're in a studio in Poland or whatever, the race is in France. But also some of those are also then remote. They're just,
And you usually have a mixture of both, meaning that you have your main commentator can sit in the booth, but you can have a talent who would connect remotely from home. So then you have to deal with all the mix minus and the mixing of the two different flavors of audio, which can sound different.
right. Well, and is there a kind of, is there an end game to this? I mean, do we, for high quality content, it feels like what you guys are saying is maybe there isn't as much ability to change it. If it's Premier League or something, you're not going to touch it. Is there an end game to how the scaling gets done?
I wouldn't say an end game. I think, like all these things, there's a variety. The same with supermarkets. There's a variety, and you have different tastes. And sometimes I might shop at Aldi, and sometimes I might shop at John Lewis, at Waitrose, because and I think it's the same. We've got a menu of solutions, and I think for us the challenge is to make them as similar in philosophy from one another, but then some are maybe SRT with some audio codecs, and maybe if there's a WAN solution, then it might be proper HEVC encodes or J2K. So we're just looking at, and that's where you get the cost value sort of relationship, it changes. But I think the solutions are varied for a reason, because the senior darts tour doesn't have the same budget as Premier League, so, and it never will do. So I don't think you can roll the same solution out for both. I don't think you will, and so the sensibility approach changes depending on the content. So us as broadcasters, challenge is to try and package that up for all the operational teams, engineering teams, everybody, so in a similar philosophy, but maybe the equipment moves and changes.
Well, isn't there pressure though to do more with less and to make something?
Always.
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the Lidl versus Waitrose question: is if we're going on Max, or if we're going on Peacock, Amazon Prime, our content is going up against Hollywood movies that are mixed in Atmos and Dolby Vision. And is there a pressure to sort of, as direct to consumer, we're used to getting very good quality. Is there a pressure to kind of bring up particularly the audio quality to be comparable to the other content on the platform?
Yes. I mean, I'm not going doing my audio shopping in Lidl or Lidl. I mean, I really think that, I mean, that's one of the things, is that it's about maintaining audio quality. There's a lot of cloud, and there's a lot of, the potential to get a lot of stuff out, but we have to be part of the conversation that maintains audio quality, whether that's immersive or it's just, the amount of microphones you use on a golf tournament. I think it's important because we still have a place in that conversation, and it's when people start taking those conversations away and saying, we've got to do this at scale, it's got to go, we got to do it for this amount of money, then that's when we sort of lose the quality, and we can't do that. We have to strive for maintaining quality across the whole platform.
But I think there's a little bit of movement. Like, I think to have standards is key, right? Have standards, But there will be some flux in that, like, content's king. And if you look at news operations, they do that all the time, where, the actual content's more important sometimes than the quality, and they'll take they'll happily take the content over the quality. And I'm not saying that's particularly what we're doing here, but I'm just saying that, but it's not black or white, right? So I think there's a standard and there's some movement within that, I think. But I think you're right, Carl. We've got to maintain broadcast principles and broadcast standards. I think that's the integrity is really important.
But sometimes, Pete, that means just not touching anything. It's like, oh, it has to be done this way. And I guess the question is, with all the technology we have available, to Michael's point earlier, is it worth sort of taking a clean sheet of paper and saying, how do we do this? Can we leverage technology or a different approach to do the same level of quality more efficiently?
Yeah, I mean,
I will add something here. Pardon.
No.
For our Dime project, we got the point that we have to deliver to all the different, I will say, generations. So we have to mix and make the audio for the old generations. They have many money. They're sitting at home, has a big screen on the wall, maybe here in Dolby Atmos or in surround. But you have to bring the audio content to the next generation, to the young generation. And they're often sitting, I will say, in his room at home, use his iPad, has iPods in the ear, and they want a good sound. So the old generation want a good sound and the new generation want a good sound. And this is not easy to create the content for all these different people at the moment. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I think we should be aiming to deliver everything in Atmos or immersive. Other flavors are available, and let the down mixers sort out the stereo. But as leaders in the audio industry, I think we should be pushing that. I'm not saying it's a bit doable today necessarily, but why can't we leverage software tools and like immersive microphones and just kind of aim a bit higher and not kind of go back and say, well, we're just going to stick with stereo, but actually kind of let's try and go further. And if direct to consumer is a great sort of test bed for that, isn't it? Why can't we deliver everything in immersive these days?
And I guess the problem is that we still to have a linear platforms that we all have to interface with, and that's sometimes harder to navigate, isn't it? At the moment, if it was all OTT, I think you're right. It will be a bit more of a blank page, and we could start again. But I guess a lot of the challenges are to integrate with the linear platforms that we still have to,
Yeah. I guess I'm sort of thinking down the direct to consumer route of like, can we not, when it is a bit more OTT and you have control over the delivery platform, like end to end a little bit more. There's a bit more flexibility to kind of, I guess, force the industry on a bit further.
Well, before the call, I mean, we get a big eye roll from production whenever we talk about Atmos, because they just automatically assume it's going to be a whole lot more, without really asking any questions. But we were talking before the call about networked immersive microphones, for instance. There's a lot of technology, and can this technology be used to do a better job of doing immersive for more cheap and cheerful content? And sometimes there are bottlenecks, in the traditional distribution of how many channels we can pass or how many channels in a program. But as we move to 2110, isn't that going away? And should we have a higher standard? And if we say, how can we do immersive on a budget, does it make a difference? I guess I'm with you, Rob, I think. No, I mean, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, the cost is a couple of extra microphones from the production level, and obviously you need some overhead speakers. There's the distribution of 10 channels. What we do is we'll do a 10-channel mix, and that's the only mix we do. And then if our cable network wants to get it, they down mix the 10 channels into 6 channels, and that's their 5-1. That's what we did for Olympics. So we maintain this 10-channel mix workflow, and we at this stage we've all kind of worked out what the down mix is and what works, so that it sounds good and immersive, and it sounds good on Michael's son's phone in the bedroom or the iPad or whatever it is. So, and I think I think what young people want to hear is what we're producing, even if it's in from immersive to stereo. But then there's the enhanced audio is like, and you can do that with the direct to consumers, like the red button in the UK is like, maybe I want to look at a feed that just has just the crowd, or just the Nats, or just the nets from the basketball, or whatever we decide is, what young people want. I think that's the solution to offering young people, or different audiences, different content.
Well, and that's an interesting question too. I mean, I think something we should talk about a little bit is just personalization. Is we can build small audiences for smaller sports, which we've talked about, but also streaming allows us to have different programs. So conceivably, we could do more personalization in terms of broadcast tailored to different fans, for instance. And where do we see that going?
I think that's a really fascinating question. I think that's one of the beauties for me about direct to consumer, is that you can start to explore some of these more personalized experiences and give a bit of control back to the consumer. So I think there's some great stuff around there, and I can hear pushback of people saying about who's going to mix all of this stuff. And obviously, me, I'd go on about automated mixing, and that's great. And I love Michael's kind of idea of having different audio scenes, and so that there is an exact example of something that you could do. We've spoken about it before on these kind of calls, of having a home and away mix. And I think there's sometimes people would say, who actually cares, who actually listens to that, but there is a really big it's huge viewership who's watching snippets on TikTok or Insta or whatever it is. And, like, you could just imagine a viral feed of like, check out the away fans when the Aguero goal went in or whatever. And you can listen to that. It might only be a 20-second clip, but the thing is, you still have to have mixed that content to get your 20-second clip. You have to have mixed the entire match. No one's going to go, oh, something's about to happen, quickly capture it. And so automation, I think, helps that. Pete, you got a finger in the air.
No, that last bit you just said, I think it has sense, because it's an applied vehicle for production, right? So therefore, for example, it's like doing certain pieces within your presentation parts in 9:16, really good for your mobile phone. It's things like that where it doesn't really cost the production any more money, but they can get added value, right? So that's the key. So it's not costing more, you're giving them more for the same, and that's where you'll get the production buy-in. So it's having enough vehicles within those sort of solutions where we can do that, and then they can then utilize that content, whether it be in post or or even in for social media. That's where I think you'll have traction. Otherwise, I just don't think you'll have the production buy-in, and then just it's already hard enough to make the content, let alone to sometimes think about extra content. So unless it has an end, it can get to the consumer. So I think that's the key.
But if the robot is mixing the TikTok, then who cares?
If the robot is for free, yeah, completely.
It's almost free, almost free. I don't know. But this personalization, we've talked about the pub mix in the past, and that's another thing. The other thing in personalization is we have to I think we're gonna see this thing. Finally, we've talked about next generation codecs for a long time, but now we see Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and Warner Brothers all looking at deploying, and Netflix looking at deploying next generation codecs.
Well, it's essential, isn't it? I mean, the Netflix example is a good one, isn't it? Because if you're on a Saturday evening watching a movie in Netflix, then you can flick between different language dialogue. But then when you flick over to watch the NFL game, you can't. So, we need to be offering different. Yeah, it's okay because that's obviously kind of OTT content rather than live, but our live workflows, I think, should be catering for wider audiences and allowing people to select different languages, and like next gen audio just makes a whole heap of sense for that. And I think, again, thinking about it from a D2C point of view, if you're going direct to consumer, then these things become a little bit more realizable because you don't have all of the legacy broadcast infrastructure in the way. You've got a bit more control and it's not quite a blank slate, but you're closer to a blank slate than you were if you were doing it over linear TV. So, why can't we be MPEG-Hing or Dolby Atmosing, AC4, to facilitate multi-language stuff or audio description feeds? I think viewers
even just dialogue, relative dialogue level. I think that's what's probably driving for different organizations, but I think for the big streamers, and Peacock is one of them too. I think that's why they're looking at next generation codecs, is just for relative dialogue level, and it's
or no dialogue.
What?
Or no dialogue. I mean, you have the choice.
Dialogue.
Yeah.
Absolutely. At Eurosport, we already offer on Max, for example, we offer, if you are looking at a Grand Slam final, anyone in his market on Max can, if you're in Serbia, you can hear to Bulgarian, to English or French or any of all the language which are produced for Eurosport. But the next generation is to be able, okay, I'm anywhere in the world, but I want to have, because I have some issue with hearing, I want to have the commentary a lot louder than the international sound, or I want to be a bit more immersed and I want to have the commentary at a lower level, or as Carl just mentioned, just remove the commentary because I just want to be in the game, and that's a very nice feature which would be very nice for the viewers, that's for sure. And you can't do that on the linear channels.
And I mean, it's been so long. We've talked so long about next generation distribution, and what I think we're going to find is partly because of the switch to direct to consumer that we're going to see it really kick in pretty fast. It's sort of, we reached a tipping point, and as you say, it's easier to deploy with direct to consumer with streaming because there aren't these levels of head ends, as Carl said earlier. There's not these complicated distribution. Goes straight to the encoder, and from the encoder it goes to the home. So
from an accessibility point of view, that's an absolute game changer, isn't it? I mean,
right.
if you're visually impaired and you're using audio description at the moment, you're getting like a crunched down mono feed because that's all that can be squeezed into the broadcast. Whereas if it was next gen, then you could have an immersive sound stage with your audio description as a phantom center or center channel, and that's 1,000 times better for an audience who kind of need good audio the most.
Yeah.
And how much of a shift to do that? How much of a shift is required? Are we ready to do that? And if Peacock says in June, they say we can do that, are we ready to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to. I mean, we need to find out exactly what features we're going to offer, and I think we've always talked about like all these different things, the home and away, and all those potential, because we have all those mixes, we have all those microphones. The A1 doesn't even have to monitor them. Off they go. They'll just be an AC4 scene. I think we just have to make it simple first and offer variances in dialogue level, and if we can give the option of no dialogue. So I mean, I think it's just coming up with the formats and the interface. What is that interface on a Peacock app, as an example? I mean, so I don't I mean, I don't really think there are many from the audio perspective. I don't think there's many challenges.
I think the solutions are there. It's that application and willingness to implement them, right? So, and I think that's, you know, especially in a DTC, you know, on a digital platform, I think we're there. It's just there's not quite the appetite or the drive yet, but I think it will get there. I think, because I think the volume dialogue level is I think a real key. You know, for my mum, she struggles. I struggle with movies, and I just want to press a really easy button and 6 dB, please. Thanks very much. And I'll be really happy with that.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, Roger. I just wanted to. Pete reminded me. I mean, we're doing all this personalization for video. You know, I mean, for Peacock we have a multi-view for Olympics, so you got 4 boxes. You choose which box. YouTube TV, do it. Everybody's doing it now, where you have those options of what you want to look at. You know, so it's like just it seems to make sense that, well, you can also change your audio mix. So I think, you know, the push is really from us to remind production that we're giving all these video options. We need to give some audio options.
Do you think that it's a device issue that it hasn't been adopted so far? Is that the kind of, is it the last point in the chain that's stopping us? Because obviously,
well, that's what stopped us in the past with traditional broadcast. Is it was a consumer electronics issue, but now with direct to consumer, you're within the environment of the app. So if you want to add a button on Max or Peacock,
but you've still got lots of devices.
Yeah.
But the function is in the function is in the audio system. That's already in the audio system. So you just need to put a control on it.
Yeah.
And I think it'll happen for VOD first, but that's why I think we'll see it happen for VOD on all these services in this calendar year, or at least on some of them.
Yeah.
And I think that'll, in some organizations, I think that'll trickle over to live more or less quickly, depending on the organization. But I know, like, the Amazon VOD guys have talked to the Amazon Prime Live guys about what they're doing, you know, and what they're looking at, and, you know, get them thinking about it. I don't think that's a secret. You know, they, you know, want their live guys to be thinking about this, so when it's available, they're putting it on live content.
The driver, as soon as you get one broadcaster doing it really, really well, then the others will have to do the same, right? So it's I think once one broadcaster does it well, or one platform does it well, then I think all the others will have the same drive, because no one wants to be left behind, right? So I think we're just waiting for that the first implementation that's really, really good, that is, you know, that the consumer really, really responds with.
And you need the buy-in from the likes of Apple as well to like natively support some of this stuff, which I think has in the past been a stumbling block that's kind of led broadcasters to think, well, it's not worth us developing.
Apple is kind of an outlier, right? Because everybody else, every Roku, every other kind of box uses the same audio system. They use the Dolby MS-12. Apple grew,
but they're a big outlier, right?
Apple grew their own because they know better, and so they're kind of behind in being able to implement next generation codec, because they don't have the same audio system the others do. Now, good news is Apple will tell you have to buy a new Apple TV, and you'll go out and you'll buy one once they support AC4 or MPEG-H or whatever. But I think there's a large enough population of non-Apple devices. And if you can, look at Amazon, as Amazon Prime is an example. Their target is an Amazon Fire Cube. You know, there's like, you're our preferred customer, you have a Fire Cube. You can still watch movies on an Apple TV, but we know we can support this feature in a Fire Cube. And if that sells more Fire Cubes, then that's a good problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Heather, were there any questions? Felix, you've been with us here. We feel like you should be answering some of these questions. Unmute for a second.
No, there's a very, very, very good panel here. They can answer all these questions. Almost all of it. Hello.
What do you think the personalization is inevitable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pub presentation you mentioned, I think I can say it was my influence to develop it already back in 2018. Immersive Mercer knows this well. When we have been in Russia for the World Cup, first time we did a complete World Cup in Dolby Atmos, and we certainly saw that this is a valuable thing. And I think I can say this 4 years later, it was used. It wasn't used in a pub, but it was used as a public viewing presentation, and it was well received by the PA guys, because for the first time they had the possibility to do their more or less their own mix, because they had the elements. It wasn't of course not done with AC4 at this time. It was still with pure actually wave channels, PCM streams going down the path to the public viewing areas, but they used it a lot. And I think the more we think about this, what can be delivered to our home consumers, the more we will start up our creative brains and think about how can we make more money, or how can we entertain them in a better way with all these elements. Unfortunately, we only have 16 channels. Perhaps we need in the future 32 channels or more.
Felix, what was the idea behind the pub mix? What was it?
The idea behind the pub mix is actually quite easy. I mean, it's quite funny, because I just spoke again 2 hours ago about media communication. That's my new topic, and I'm referring to this already for a while. Whenever we do some media product, whether it's a classical music recording, whether it's a football, NFL, whatsoever, concerts we are producing, quite often, even musicians, they are saying, yeah, it sounds like I have been in the arena. It sounds like I have been in the football stadium. It should sound like the concert where I have been to. And we all know it never sounds like this. Yeah, it's always a complete different mix. It's a different communication we as sound engineers, as tone meisters, develop to convince people at home. It sounds like you think you are at the concert, but with complete different sound pressure, different mix, not better mix usually actually for people at home. This is different in the pub. Yeah, I mean, in the arena, in the football arena, you have something like 50,000, 100,000 people cheering, and you know this. They have their, you always want to hear this, Roger. The currywurst, yeah, they have their sausage, and it smells.
Right, currywurst, yep.
Exactly, the currywurst, the Stadionwurst, we say in Germany, and you don't have this at home. Again, in the pub, you have this. There is already an audience. We don't need crowd sound actually in the pub. The pub itself is the crowd. And then we say, but quite often it's really difficult to understand ball kicks, camera sound, boom sound, and commentators in the pub. And of course, pub providers, they compensate this with just rising up the commentator sound, or even start to EQ the ready mix we do, Carl, you and me and all these guys, mixing football and commentators with football. And then it sounds quite often for the crowd and for all the rest, it sounds horrible. Therefore, we decided, or we thought about, let's provide them elements. Let's provide them ball kicks. Let's provide them audio for the video, the anthems, music, and all this kind of stuff, and just a little bit of crowd, because they are their own crowd. So we took apart all this ORTF 3D stuff, just the stand left and stand right, just this individual stems, and this works really nice. In a pub, you don't need this immersive sound from our well-defined, pristine, immersive microphones. Think about 500,000 people. I still remember in 2006, back in 2006, the World Cup in Germany, there were 500,000 people on the Straße 17. Juni, the street of the 17, in front of the Brandenburg Tower. You know this, yeah? It's much bigger crowd sound than you ever have in a stadium. You don't need crowd sound for these guys. You need the ball kicks. You need the details. Details are super important for me for proper immersion. It's perhaps even more important than the crowd sound. On these ball kicks and whistles, and now we start in Germany to put the referee on the PA as well. For the results, they tried this out last weekend. Of course, it's inherited from NFL. You guys do this already for a long time in the US. Hockey.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Echoing through the stadium.
Yeah, that's the part, and with thing about I mean, I did boxing for a long time, and you have the red and the blue corner with a boom or even with a wireless microphone. Perfect example for elements. I switch to my whatever Klitschko corner, and you switch to Tyson Fury corner. Yeah, which could be a presentation. Very nice.
Yeah. Well, I hope we get to do it.
Yeah, it's getting more complicated for us. More people, more automation.
Well, I mean, the answer is that it isn't the answer that it has to be. That has to be automated in order to be cost effective. But I guess it's sort of what's the quality going in, you know, sort of determines whether it can be automated.
Yeah. Because Felix has joined us, I wanted to kind of go back to, if it's okay, Roger, to the tools that we're using, and because you did talk about, you know, plugins and things like that, and AI tools to help us, and you know, Felix was one of the first people to use you know, kind of a submix of the ball kicks. And I think, you know, as A1s and sound supervisors and mixers, you know, it's sort of hard it has been difficult for us to get over this kind of the creativeness of who we are, or artisticness of who we are as a community. And I think sometimes it just takes those you know, people like Felix to kind of and Bundesliga, really, the fact of doing all these little I guess you can call it an AI mix, but of like a submix of a football pitch or a ice hockey rink or something like that. Just, you know, to get over the idea that these are outside of our influence. There really are creative tools that we are using now. You know, and we're starting, you know, a lot of trucks have servers now for plugins, and so rather than having all the outboard stuff, we're doing now a lot of you know, plugins for, you know, compression, and for even for immersive audio. We're using some, you know, stuff in the overheads to provide some movement. So I think we're getting you know, we're getting a lot more you know, help from these tools. So I think it's just a matter of time before we you know, start doing a lot more auto mixes. I know it seems like a bad word, auto mix, but you know, it's a tool for A1s and sound supervisors.
Well, source separation we were talking about before the call is an example of that. That you were talking about it earlier, that noise on the commentary is a big problem. If we can do real-time source separation of the commentary, then that helps improve the quality at source, or source separation of ball sounds.
Yeah, that's hugely important. That clarity, you know, and I'm used to it from doing you know, an NBC Olympics and a world host Olympics. When you listen to the host Olympics that doesn't have anything in the center channel, it has some room tone, it has, you know, a nice ambience from the venue. It's a very nice wide mix. Nuno Duarte and the whole team there do a great job. And then NBC go along and we do our own mix. We put commentators in the middle and they're sitting underneath the PA, and the whole image gets a little bit more narrow, you know. So if we can do, you know, I'm a great fan of having announcers in a booth, of course, because you don't have any of that apart from the time they tap on their keyboard or they're opening a candy bar or something like that. But you know, source separation and those sort of tools can help us behind the scenes, you know, and provide a lot more clarity and a lot more intelligibility. So yeah, I'm a great fan of those tools.
Well, and you mentioned Kick, and Kick uses the graphics, XY graphics of the ball tracking. These days, we can almost do that by analyzing the video. And what does it matter what the source of it is? Rob, are we close?
Yeah, I mean, totally. You can do it. You can from the camera one feed, you can get the location of the ball and do an auto mix, and then obviously you can do it based off the audio only. So there's a whole suite of tools, isn't there? There's no excuse now to be getting a really good field of play mix that like an A1 can finesse by, you know, selectively fading in other elements. But there's there's a ton of tools out there, some of them produced by us. But I think we're in a better position than we've ever been, and being able to create really good stems, whether it's cleaned up commentary with source separation, whether it's kind of field of play and like immersive crowd, that then just opens up your palette to be doing any of the other things that we're talking about, whether it's automating multi-languages, whether it's kind of offering personalization. If you've got nice, clean, well-separated stems, then you've got like a really clean palette, and you can do some really awesome stuff with the audio.
Well, sounds exciting. Looking forward to it. Any final thoughts, anyone? No? Pete? No?
Usually no.
Okay. Well, this has been great. This has been a great discussion. And I do think in this sort of transition to direct to consumer, we really are in this moment of change. And there are opportunities to look at things differently. And certainly we're going to be challenged to do some of this personalization. But I think there are also opportunities to do what Michael's been talking about sort of taking a clean slate and looking at it. And I think that same approach, it's harder to do on high value content, but I think it's worth looking at, or looking at how can we raise the production value of less expensive content. So, Heather?
So many opportunities, and you just need more money. That's all.
It's not
unlimited budgets. That's what we need.
Well, I think it's sort of doing more with less. How do you become more efficient? How do you automate more? How do you leverage? All this technology has got to be doing something for us.
Totally. Yeah, I think you guys are on the case pretty well. Well, on that note, thank you everyone for joining us. Next up, we are going to be live online for SVG Europe Audio on the 4th of June, talking about digital mics. So if you've got anything you fancy talking about in that area, please give me a shout. Other than that, I'm looking forward to seeing some of you hopefully at our next in-person events. We've got SVG Europe Women, Innovation and Accessibility in Scotland on the 25th of February, our Winter Sports Forum in Norway on the 13th of March, and then a City United from SVG Europe Women in Manchester on the 19th of March. And the next day, we've got our football summit at Etihad Stadium on the 20th of March. So we've got a couple of really busy months. So it'd be cool to see some of you there and have a beer. But thank you very much. And this will be available on demand early next week. So thank you, Roger. Thank you, all my brilliant speakers. And thanks everyone for turning up.